that was to bring us up. Now, what I heard was now that whole group that had agreed, and then within a few days called this guy back and declined. And it turned out, I forget, it was 8 or 10 people. It was like a priest, a psychiatrist, an economist, a educator, some political figure. That all of these that had originally agreed to be on Let's Laugh At and then declined, they have now gotten back in touch with the cable station, and they have one and all agreed to appear on an unabashed, an unmistakable show of a guy who is really a hostile interviewer. I don't know what to make of it either, but I thought I'd pass along since I heard it about it. We were, as you recall, we were talking about the Big Four. Notre Dame, we were talking about the Big Four areas over in a strange place that we were calling the desire to know where you are, being more creative and original, being an expert, and using second-order ancillary derivative maps. Did I say Michigan State or not? And we were last noting, if you recall, that amongst the collective, just ordinary intelligence, the ordinary thinking of humanity, that to be an expert requires the ability to ignore the obvious, and in a certain kind of surprising little spin to it, perhaps, I suggested, as we were noting, that being able to ignore the obvious, to be an expert and be able to ignore the obvious, can also be seen as an expert being able to treat the obvious as though it were not obvious, if you recall examples. To someone who seems to be leading a dance, a politician, anybody can get up and make a statement, and assume he's already got some sort of forum, where I was calling them followers, that this political figure or this writer, somebody stands up, and he appears to be an expert in some field, and he points out what from certain undeniable views would be the obvious. The one I made up of a conservative politician saying that the majority of property crimes are committed by the poor. And his followers, whether he did it in print or in person, they applaud this and they treat it as though it is worthy of an expert. Did you hear that? When, in a sense, he had to treat the obvious as though it were not obvious. But now you understand, that's the same thing as being able to ignore the obvious. I called it quirky last time to try to get you to see it, but I don't know whether I stressed it enough or whether some of you, most of you are kind enough now or something enough that you won't say, wait a minute, you said one thing and it ended up, and as far as I could tell, you proved just the opposite. Hey, it didn't cost him more. Now, the ability to ignore the obvious includes, that's one of the, I must tell you, it's one of the prime cuts of being an expert, is to be able to treat the obvious. And it takes, of course, the dancers with you. It takes the expert and the follower, someone to react. But being able to ignore the obvious includes, when it is really running on all 8 cylinders, it includes being able to treat the obvious as though it were not. That's ignoring the obvious. You do understand that too. Just point out, such as most property crimes, I mean most, are committed by the poor. And you hear people just, that they're just intellectually taken away. That they hear it, and to them, it is, that's inspired. That's the kind of leadership we need. That man doesn't need to be a writer. He doesn't need to be a political commentator. He needs to be president. Anyone who could see that. When, as you got to agree, we're not making fun of them. Oh, it was just my temples hurt for a minute. But from one view, you have to say, well, it's as obvious as hell. Except this continually goes on. I'm fixing to try and drag you to even a more murky, refreshing area than that one, is what I'm trying to refresh your memory in this respect for. That being able to ignore the obvious includes treating the obvious as though it were otherwise. All right. I was going to try and drag this into the 4th big area, Indiana. No, that was Notre Dame. The University of Nebraska. I'd like to Invite up the team, the Cornheads. That's not exactly it, is it? Well, they get these strange things going on in the higher echelons of the world of academia. Backhanded compliments, I guess, calling each other cornheads. At any rate, to drag in to the fact that the intellect is normally, at the collective level, is using what amounts to ancillary maps and directions of reality, as opposed to something else. And for the time being, we say as opposed to whatever the initial source of the maps were. That the secondary world is an outgrowth of the primary. And anything that it defines, describes, maps, talks about is in some sense, and it can't help it, it's not a pejorative description, it is in a quite real sense a derivative. It is an auxiliary, it is an ancillary map of something else, as it has to be. The trickier little side path, as I was suggesting, would amount to stating it to start with this. And please note that this is not a mere commentary on double talk or psychobabble or bureaucratic doublespeak, which I am vaguely familiar with all those kinds of attacks, and it, as always, is a reflection of something real, but this is not a social criticism of how people say one thing and mean another. You mean you saw that for yourself? Without my help? Where's life again? Wait until life hears about this. Because once you got that down, then you're in charge that you can have your own stamp made. There's no law against it in this country. We're still free. You can get a stamp made, big, and you can't have it and stamp it. Irony when you see it. All right. So remember, this is not, but I'm going to use the kind of examples. But keep that in mind to begin with, that it has nothing to do with a criticism that people engage in some kind of bureaucratic, political, social double talk. Jesus, everybody knows that. See, everybody doesn't know that because they take it as being some sort of willful scheme, which of course is ironic. But so keeping that in mind, here it is. And that, first off, let's state the premise that man's intellectual secondary world is run on, directed by ancillary maps and directions. Now here is what don't get stuck in, because it's, even though it is true, even though it is valid kindergarten kind of notation that people's already made, there's something behind it that I'm trying to get you to see. So I'm not going to stretch for any great example, just the kind of thing that you're ordinarily exposed to. An insurance company states that based upon our increasing concern over multi-vehicle ownership by single-family units and the inherent possible activities thereof, we have been forced to realign and rethink our complete policy structure. And we'll have to reschedule our premiums accordingly. Policyholders, which amount to followers of an expert in this case. Policyholders will hear this, even discuss it amongst themselves, pass it along and seriously talk about it, when what is being said, the original behind the derivative description, is simply the desire for the company, which is proper, to take in more money. But see, you see why I warned you, any of you who followed that now, because you could take that and go, oh yeah, boy, damn insurance companies. I could have picked out anything. Churches. Those of you who were good, I could pick out family structures. I could pick out social situations. But that's why I warned you in advance, because most people dislike insurance companies, rightfully so. But that's not our bit. No, I was just being funny. I was just being funny. Listen, if reality can find it humorous enough to even think up somewhere the concept of insurance, to have creatures, to have finite creatures betting on each other about how long they're going to live. And of course, many of those who buy the policies, they're even betting without realizing they're betting, well, I'll live forever. Boy, I'll outfox them. At any rate, if reality's got that kind of sense of humor, who are we not to participate? So at any rate, it is not, you understand, it is not simply, if you were really dumbasses, I could have made that, brought that little story and made up that kind of thing an insurance company could say, and everybody, nod. Boy, yeah, insurance companies, they pull that kind of crap, they tell you, well, we're suffering great losses, and the accident rate, the poorer the quality of the automobile, the more accidents there are, the more that we're having to pay out, and therefore, just to survive, we have got to raise our premiums. When, by God, I heard Ralph Nader's brother-in-law, or I heard somebody told me that the return on insurance companies now are higher than many municipal bonds. They're not fooling me, they're just saying that. Boy, are you, hey, they can't pull anything over on you. The world's full of that. But then to just dismiss it as well, they just don't want to admit it. You got to look at it another way. They can't hide it. Do you understand? You're back to the old double dumbass whammy. If you were still the type that would hear an insurance company go through all of that, doctor, they state, the president, they put it out in a public announcement, they buy ads in major newspapers, full page, saying, due to our corporate increasing concern over the multi-vehicle ownership of single-family units, perhaps even younger and younger drivers now on the highways, and the increasing inherent accident rate, we have been forced, for the benefit of all of our policyholders, that is, so we can pay off we have been forced to rethink, realign our policy and premium requirements. Now, if you're an ordinary person, you could hear that, and if you'd already assumed that I was just some ordinary social critic or some smart ass like you, and that you thought, well, it's just an attack, you could go, yeah, boy, they don't fool me. All right, there's the first whammy. You think, they don't fool me, those smart ass insurance companies trying to do that. No, see. You're gonna miss at least half the fun, because it's a double dumb whammy. Double dummy whammy, that was the full term, wasn't it? The double dummy whammy is you thinking that they're trying to pull something. And then you thinking that you saw through it. If you don't take that second step, it's like just, having a chili dog without the chili. You're missing half of it. We just simply look at it another way. The world is full of, that's the basis of almost all ordinary humor, as you know. It's the basis of all sarcasm, irony, and etc. It is part of the friction that makes the secondary world run. But all you got to do is just have a glimmer of some sort of extraordinary intelligence. That is, any intelligence. Well, Kyroots pointed out tonight, it's not how much you know, it's a matter of whether you actually know anything. For you to think that you heard an insurance company say this, or you read this and you went, hey, don't pull my chain, give me a break. Who do you think I am? You think I just fell off that turnip truck with those muddy plates from Arkansas? Hey, you're not fooling me. Think about it another way. Do they think they're fooling you? I mean, if you to think, well, I must be somewhere in the same genetic bloodline as Erasmus. Voltaire, I feel his blood, his genes bubbling. Yeah, you can't fool me like that. Look at another way. How dumb can you be? Is it fooling anybody? I mean, they're saying that because corporations have a heart. Not that, you got to understand, if you look at it from another legal way, there is no such thing as a corporation. It's known as a legal fiction. But then people take that and they say, well, corporations have no heart. And ordinary social critics would say that. They don't really know what they're saying. What they're saying is, I'm powerless compared to this. But to say they have no heart, I mean, we're going to call life again? Life? Do you realize that corporations have no heart? We're going to get life here to hear that? Think how dumb this is. You're going to be down to the triple dummy level, because life is going to have to show up and say, all right, you called to tell me that, and then it's going to have to say, well, you don't have to have gone to law school, but are you just literate enough to realize that a corporation doesn't actually exist? There is no such thing. A church doesn't actually exist. It's not the buildings for the corporation specifically. It's just a fiction for other reasons I'm not going into. But for it to say, you're going to call and tell me something that doesn't exist, doesn't have a heart. Back to where we were, remember. I warned you, damn it, sufficiently. not to get caught up that this was some criticism. It is the fact that man's intellectual secondary world properly, inevitably runs on derivative maps, which is what this is. It's not double talk. It's not insurance companies sitting around thinking they're going to outsmart you. Oh, they can sit around, but hell, they're engaged now in the triple dummy whammy. So, hey, let's put out this statement, and we'll make it sound like, we'll tell them how concerned. In fact, they tell the ad man, be sure and put, when it gets to the part about our increasing concern, make that very. Hey, that'll get them. They all chuckle, ha, ha, ha. The dumbasses will buy insurance anyway. They'll believe anything. Well, if they do that, all I can tell you is, at least you're in good company, because they're now down to the triple dummy whammy. It's not a matter of fooling. It is a matter, but do note that everybody's been doing this. This is not something new. It did not start with Erasmus or Voltaire. It started as soon as man could speak. Oh, all right, 5 minutes later. As soon as the first man said something, and assuming that the intelligence was about equal all across the Garden of Eden or Mesopotamia, that's why they didn't take care of the place. Assuming that by the time the first guy said something, within 5 minutes, the other guy that heard it, the other guy walked away and thought, who the hell does he think he's fooling? I mean, that was the first line. I don't know what a man said, but I do know what the second line was, or I don't know what the first guy said. And don't give me that thing about Eve says, what the hell is that thing you got there? Well, that's an old Baptist joke. For any of you old Baptists that know what that thing is, but I guess Baptists do, because where did little Baptists come from? I'm not sure what the first man said, but I can tell you what the second man said, or at least thought, which is the same thing. As soon as the first man said something, the second man walked off and thought, who the hell does he think he's fooling? Whatever it was, there it is. So it's not that it's some kind of new observing that people say things rather than what they mean. People speak in aphorisms. It's double speak. Where's George Orwell? He'd be boiling mad by now. He'd say, I told you people so. And I'm telling you, the second thing ever said was, who they think they're fooling, which is this. It has to run on the ancillary maps. A president, a tyrant, somewhere, a political situation. He announces, for the sake of all, for the public safety, for the good of the common decent folk, I'm going to have to temporarily forbid any criticism of the government. And ruefully, I hate to, but I'm going to have to, at my own expense, I'm going to have to undertake yet another term as president for life, which is a real tyrant, a man who announces, more than once he's been appointed himself president for life. You're talking serious tyranny here, folks. I mean, don't wait around for this man to come to his senses. At any rate, what else can they say? Or I was going to put it to you perhaps another way, that I've done enough of that. Now consider it this way, that all such examples, and we could go on forever, all you got to do is listen to any, well anyway, you see the point. It would be behind the kinds of social criticism that's been going on forever. The basis of irony. While all of these examples are absolutely proper in the secondary world, all this kind of activity, that is, that they're being run by derivative ancillary maps and directions. That's what those are. That's what the insurance company is doing by saying about its concern about this and this, when the initial desire, which is no secret unless you're a double dummy, that their desire is to take in more money. And if you're going to fall on the floor or won't take notes or go, aha, I knew it. Get on the train. Get on the bus. You're not going anywhere. It is no secret. That is what runs, that's the kind of maps, that's the kind of verbiage that runs the secondary world. But do note, there is absolutely nothing comparable in the primary. Now you can take a note. Huh? Nothing. It runs on the plain and direct. When it gets to man's secondary intellectual world, for ordinary information, that is, intellectual energy, non-physical energy, and the ordinary world, for information to flow among the collective, it required that there be a certain degree of ambiguity. It's got to be loose. Now that is what is reflected by such things as the man saying, well, for everyone's own good, I am simply, this is the tyrant, I am simply your servant. I am your humble servant. And for your good, I'm going to have to forbid, for the time being, all criticism of the government till things get stable for your own good. And I hate it, Jesus, but I'll go ahead for your benefit, and I'll take on one more term of president for life. And you can laugh if you're ordinary and go, who do they think we're fooling? Or you can laugh at the insurance company. But you understand that is the looseness in the flow of energy that creates a kind of ambiguity. Or else you wouldn't have people going, hey, I'm no dummy, who are they fooling? When you're right, you're no dummy, you're a double dummy. It's a double dummy whammy. It is a kind of true looseness. You remember, it's the kind of thing there has to be a tolerance, another way I put it to you some time back, for any machinery to work, especially a vivus machina. If a machine is going to operate, there has to be a tolerance in it. You cannot make gears mesh perfectly. You can, but if you remember your 5th grade engineering courses, if you tooled out, if you fabricated gears and you made them fit perfectly, what would you have? Non-functioning gears. That's all. They won't move. There has to be a looseness, there has to be some tolerance, or nothing will run in this finite universe. And it is the same with information at the ordinary level. That is why, now ordinary people would say, well, people continually say what they don't mean. People continually, especially the insurance company, especially people that get in some position of power, which is why those examples are easy to make instead of individuals. Boy, you let an institution get big, you let a company get big, insurance, and boy, the first thing you know, they start thinking they can hypnotize us. So they got the deep pockets and they'll take advantage of us and they'll tell us anything. They'll say, well, we're going to have to raise your premiums for your own good. And I think, I'm no idiot, you're not doing it for my own good, but what can I do? I'm powerless. That's not it. So you missed it. You're not powerless. You're as big a dummy as anybody else. I mean, next time they have the annual, if they still have it, dummies parade, get in the front rank. Hold your head up high and march. No. They can't take that away from you. What is going on in a quite real sense is a necessary looseness. There is an ambiguity in ancillary maps, whereas if there is nothing comparable at the primary level because it is plain and direct. I know they don't talk and we're not playing Aesop Revisited, but animals do not deal in ambiguity. Lions do not go up to wildebeest and maybe give him a slap and just stun him and then think, well, do I like wildebeest that much or not? Or a wildebeest does not, suddenly have a lion draw back and the wildebeest say, now wait a minute, are you serious or just playing around? There is no looseness, there is no ambiguity. If there is, it's suicidal. They do not deal in ancillary information. They do not deal in derivative information because there is nothing beyond that level to them. There's nothing to be derived from that. That's the beginning and the end. I won't try to be original. If they had a verbal law at the primary level, it is simply et or be it. It's always it. Live or die. This or that, up or down. But when you have no ambiguity, when you literally have no room to maneuver, you don't need ancillary maps. What the hell good would they do? As I just pointed out, if you fought it, they would be suicidal if they had them. So rather than ordinary social critics saying, well, this kind of double talk, or you saying ancillary maps, is improper. That is not the way life should be. How can it be at the secondary level? If the secondary world attempted, which it could not, but if in some way it attempted to be run as plain and directly as the primary, it would no longer be the secondary. There has to be this kind of ambiguity. There has to be this looseness. There has to be, what it amounts to is simply the manifestations of the secondary world being run on ancillary information, being run directed by derivative maps. And therefore it cannot be as plain and direct as the primary. It's not supposed to be. It has to be the information that's going on amongst ordinary minds. It has to be loose enough, it has to be vague enough to where all can partake of it. And in fact, be able to add to it. Well, now we're getting somewhere, right? If there was such thing as ordinary mystics and dreamers and philosophers like to talk about, that there is some real secret, serious information. That's actually information, somewhere in a book or in somebody's brain, something, if I heard it, would be the key to everything. Some piece of information. If there were, do you understand, it would be too tight for anybody to hear. There would be no way for the ordinary mind to get into it. If there was the secret, and it was in a sentence, that's a sentence. If it was, and you hand it to people, they couldn't get their brain into it. It would not be loose enough. You've got to loosen it up. It has to be a little vague, or your mind couldn't partake of it. And if it's vague enough for your mind to partake of it, then, here we go, justice, then it's, hey, good luck. Because then, as Kyroots pointed out, in the secondary world, in the secondary gardens of the mind, are many very diverse and attractive flowers. But to a revolutionist nose, they eventually began to suspiciously smell similar. That is, if everybody else knows it, forget it. Or at the ordinary level, if that's where you're operating, wait a minute. If this is something that my ordinary intellect, if this is something my ordinary mind can understand, hey, fuck it. Who needs it? But wait a minute, then you'd be left with this. I'm speaking now for ordinary people who may be watching. Why are ordinary people watching? Would say, wait a minute, if that's true, then the only thing that would have any meaning to me would be something that I don't understand. Can you believe that somebody would say something like that? I know I can't. Good night.